open this with public participation. Seeing no one come forward, we'll move on from public participation. This is an empty chamber today. Everybody must be mad at us.
Well, it's not normal, yeah.
Friday.
Oh, it's Friday.
I feel like people can hear us like blink. These things are so loud. Can you hear me blinking?
Okay, we're going to start out. This whole meeting is a discussion of the proposed 2050 comprehensive plan. If you could, Mr. Papa, Mr. Tyner, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Mayor. And
Pause for just a second.
Yes, sir.
Pause. I would like to ask the council, how much time do we have? I think we had that baby box thing at noon. I don't know if we can push that to the right a little bit, but I think us as a council, we are done with the storming phase. We are in the norming. I think we're in norming now, General. So I think we need to have some, we're going to have a heart-to-heart today if we can. But hopefully we'll get through this. Mr. Tyner, Mr. Papa, how long do you think this is going to take?
presentation should be short.
Okay.
And we're relying on council for comments and direction to move forward, so that it's completely up to council.
Okay, so we need to have a little bit of discussion, so it. Yeah, say again?
I said it mostly would be a discussion.
Okay.
Between us and try to figure this out.
All right, please, sir, continue.
Yes, sir. Again, good morning, Mayor and members of City Council. Jose Papa for the Community Development Department, and to my right, of course, is Mr. Ray Tyner. So, with Council's direction from the last workshop we had regarding the Comprehensive Plan 2050, we're bringing forward two specific elements. And the first element is only a portion of it. That's the master plan mixed use. And then, of course, the housing element. And at the end of this, again, what staff is really looking for is to hear your discussion on the elements and the goals, objectives, and policies within those elements, and to give us direction on how you'd like us to move forward. Maybe there's some additional amendments or changes you'd like to see to those goals, objectives, and policies. Just being very brief, again, the update to the Comprehensive Plan 2050 were based on the guiding principles that were developed in coordination with the community. And these are, and as part of developing those guiding principles, we developed an icon set that is attached to each principle, and those are found throughout the proposed 2050 plan, just sort of in order to assist the reader as to provide some background as to where that particular goal or objective comes from. So going through the master plan mixed use designation, this is a new land use designation in our in the proposed comprehensive plan. And so just some background on this. Using we have a projected population of about 158,000 in 2050. This is an increase of 63,000 persons over our current population. The additional 17,000, and some of these numbers might be outdated. Remember, we started the comprehensive plan, I believe, in 2022, and some of our data and analysis is from 2022. So that calls for, that 63,000 persons calls for about an additional 17,000 units over the existing 8,000 vacant lots that are available, and those 8,000 vacant lots really represent what the ITT development entitled. The master plan mixed use is in recognition that we have about 12,000 acres in approved but undeveloped DRIs west of the railroad. That's Old Brick Township and Neoga Lakes, which have approval for 12,000 units and about 3.6 million square feet of non-residential. There's an additional 3,300 acres that, of course, has been discussed west of the railroad, which currently have, there's an additional 3,300 acres west of the railroad, which still currently contains the county future land use designation. And those are mainly found towards the southern and southwest area of the city boundaries west of the railroad track. And then there's discussion of about 7,000 additional acres in the future annexation area. And I just point that out, I think.
Put your cursor, could you put your cursor on that 3,000 acres?
Yes,
Where
sir.
are you talking about?
Yes, sir. It's mainly down here.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, sir. And so at the end,
Oh, the donut hole, how many acres is that?
that's about 7,000, about 7,200 acres. That's closer to it. So at the end of the day, we're looking at about, since the master plan mixed use is to be available to areas west of the railroad tracks, that contains about 20,300 acres that under the transmitted plan are to be designated as the master plan mixed use future land use designation. Continuing with some other additional background, when we were going through the community outreach for Imagine 2050, some of the things we heard regarding infrastructure and quality of life were things about the additional commercial and industrial opportunities that I think the residents recognize as needed in the city. Maintaining our quality parks and open space and expanding that to as the population grows. Creating a more walkable community. Of course, having our infrastructure keep up with the demands of any growth that we have. A big thing is life stage housing. Again, this recognition that we're a community of varying demographics and in various life stages. When I came here 15 years ago, my kids were not in school. In fact, I only had 2 kids. So now I have 1 in college and 1 in high school, 2 in high school. And so I guess the point being that our community changes, and some of us will age with this community. And I'm sure I'm not the only family that did that. And of course, having better protection for our historic resources. And this future land use map, this is just to highlight where we were. The proposed map that was transmitted, as you can see on the right, was to change everything to master plan mixed use. I'm sorry, I'm trying to find the cursor. As you can see on this map. Based on the last workshop we had, we are to revert back to the 2035 map, which we see on the left. So should we move forward with adoption of the 2050 comprehensive plan, the map on the left will be the map that's included in the 2050 comprehensive plan.
Go back, please, for a second.
Yes, sir.
So why, down at that southern end, on the adopted, you got all that, put your cursor over that green area?
Yes, sir.
No, other map.
Oh, this one?
Yep,
Yes,
right there. Okay, so what's the difference between the one on the right and the one on the left, as far as that green area? Why is it designated different?
Yes, so under the proposed, these are owned by the same landowner who now controls both the Old Brick Township and the Neoga Lakes DRI. And this additional lands under the proposed map would have converted to master plan mixed use. So with the map that's proposed to be adopted, the one on the left, it will remain as Flagler County, it will retain this Flagler County flume. And the change will come essentially maybe when they bring in the donut hole. Or they'd have to come in for an application if they intend to change the designation of this. I believe I mentioned it was about 3,000 acres.
So how does that still fall on the county flume if it's inside the city limits?
Yes, sir. So under state statutes, annex lands continue to retain their county, the designation that they have until they go through the public process of amending their designation. No different than when we annex areas around the airport. When they come into the city, they'll retain the county zoning and county land use designation until such time we go through the public process of changing them to a city designation for flume and zoning.
Okay,
So,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
follow-up question on that. So is that process an automatic process, or does that come with or triggered by an application for a change of land use designation?
Typically, it would be, we would require them to file an application to see what designation they'd like.
So they're required to
They're
file
required,
that?
yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes,
so
sir. Yes, yes.
it is automatic and triggered by
Yes,
their.
we're, as city staff, we have a different code and different comprehensive plan from the county.
No, understood.
Yes,
yeah.
sir. And so-
by law, we're kind of required at least to maintain the
Yes, sir.
closest entitlements to what they already have.
And it would require a public process, an ordinance. It'd have to go through planning board for public hearings, neighborhood meetings, and then city council, 2 readings for
Gotcha.
city council to change.
Thank you.
So could they develop that land under the county flume rather than annexing in or going under the cities?
I don't believe we have a policy that, let's just say that we would,
So if they wanted to build 5 3-story apartment buildings, could they do it under the county flume?
with that specific case, no, because I know that as agriculture and timberlands, they have very limited density. But if they were to come in and want to do that, they would apply to the city for that type of project. And what we would tell them is that you need, what staff would tell them is that you need to amend your future land use map designation and your zoning designation. And if that's the project you want to do, you, as the applicant, need to identify the flume designation and the zoning designation that would allow you to move forward with your project. And we would then review it for consistency with our comprehensive plan and land development code and make a recommendation to planning board and to city council. And then it will be up to planning board to make a recommendation to the city council, and you ultimately will have the decision to make of whether that proposed change is yes.
So just for clarity, under the 2035 map, they would have to apply for changes. We would have to accept them because those entitlements are what they are. So they're proposing a change in entitlements. We would have to accept them, and we have the right to deny.
Yes.
Under the 2050, it would be MPMU, and then a MPD would have to be negotiated for any development.
Yes, sir. That's essentially the
Clarity on
process.
those 2 different scenarios. Right?
I'm sorry.
If I may, just because I've been here and I've been very vocal about this issue, so I might be able to provide a little bit historical perspective on this as well. So what you said, Mr. Papa, a few minutes ago regarding consistency is exactly why I kind of gave some pushback on just automatically changing this as a part of the comp plan. They're wanting to propose some pretty big changes as far as the map is concerned. And I do think, and I've thought a lot about this, I do think fundamentally moving forward with the land use of the MPMU, allowing for that in the comp plan is a good idea, because we do need to kind of start to adapt to the fact that the state has gotten rid of the DRI. However, I was not comfortable with automatically going with the MPMU as the land use for these areas, because as Mr. Papa just said, when they come before us for an application, one of the things we have to look at is whether it's consistent, right? If there's consistency. And if we've already changed it in the comp plan, as you've pointed out before, Mayor, one of the things that we have to look at is it consistent with the comp plan? If we've already changed it, it makes it harder, I think, for us from a legal standpoint to really shape what we see as the future of the westward expansion if we've already kind of conceded that we're going to turn this land use into MPMU. So it's been my position that we stick with the 2035 maps as is, and then when they come in with their application, they have to apply for that future land use change, they have to apply for the zoning changes. And then what you just said, Councilman Miller, we would be able to negotiate that MPD without having this argument that, well, it's consistent with your comp plan, it's consistent with your comp plan, and that being held over our heads because we've already conceded that in the comp plan amendment. So I hope that provides a little bit of context as to kind of how we got to this place and why I made that argument.
Go ahead.
Vice
Go right
Mayor,
ahead,
I think that's very helpful to help lay that out, So my takeaway from, not down in the weeds in the legal perspective, but kind of from a strategic view is we're going to have several bites at this apple. And even if, I think if somebody tries to pin us against our own comprehensive plan, we have the right to change our comprehensive plan, don't we? I mean, aren't we in the driver's seat?
We do, but it's going to be hard to argue it. I hope they're changing their comprehensive plan because they don't want us to do what we want to do.
Yeah, we need to look ahead, because we all know what the desire is for out there, I think. So when we're looking ahead, looking at, can there be a legal argument made that the application in front of us at that time is consistent with the comp plan? If we change the maps now, that absolutely will be the argument against us. Whereas to your point, if we want to control this and have those bites at the apple, we can change this later on when we see the whole plan in front of us.
Vice Mayor, so my question is rather than saying let's not do it, what changes to the definitions of MPMU and the comp plan would satisfy those thoughts about the future so that we're not conceding everything, for the foreseeable future, right? And I agree with you in terms of what you were saying about MPMU, and to me, the positives of this are the flexibility, right? Because we all know we currently are in a situation where, to the point that you made, I think 2 weeks ago, about, we have land use zoning capability right now, so we could just zone it how we see fit now if we wanted to. To that point, we are currently boxed in with the zoning that was created 50 years ago here in Palm Coast, and so at the time that was probably thought to be a forward-thinking way to design cities and a great way to do it. And we see now that we're kind of limited in terms of commercial and industrial and things like that. And so I would advocate that this gives us a flexibility for the future that we don't currently have. And to Councilman Gambaro's point that there'll be several bites at this, the MPDs will, my understanding is that the MPDs won't consume this entire land. There'll be small pieces at a time that could be negotiated over and over and over again as that grows, as city planning changes, as what best practices are, what our needs are for the future, et cetera. So I agree with that. I guess it goes back to the question of what satisfies, our thoughts in terms of what's necessary as kind of the overall guiding principles of this land, not necessarily the specifics of the MPDs.
So it's a really good question, and I've thought really hard about this, and I met with staff several times about this. So number one, first and foremost, is to not adopt this MPMU designation on these maps yet as a part of this comp plan. Don't adopt the new map, stick with the old map, but continue onward with the new land use designation in the comp plan of MPMU to allow the landowner to come in and apply for that future land use, to go through that application process. If you look at, I don't know if you all have had a chance to look at the current DRIs. Obviously, when we first transmitted this to the state, I was very vocal about my dissatisfaction with the fact that in the current DRIs, the landowner was supposed to build the infrastructure that we've gotten over $100 million from the state to build. In addition, the current DRIs have a lot of obligations on the current landowner, including building a sports complex. And here we are, trying to jump through hoops, figuring out how we're going to build a sports complex when these DRIs put that onus on the landowner. If we get rid of that in this process, it doesn't necessarily let them off the hook, but it's the first step to letting them off the hook. So, I agree with you. I think that the MPMU is the forward-thinking land use designation that we need to start considering, but we need to make sure that we're doing it on our terms and not theirs. So to directly answer this, another part of your question, I think that we need to make sure that in the MPMU, we are addressing the same concerns that the state brought up, which was, are we being specific enough about the type of zoning, the commercial versus the residential? Candidly, Councilman Miller, the reason why we don't have much industrial is because a lot of it was converted over the
know.
past several years, unfortunately. So, and that's why, I've been, to the chagrin of maybe many developers in the city, I've been pounding my fists and trying to fight that because we do need the industrial. So I just want to make sure that as we go forward and we move west, we're not furthering a problem that we already have in current Palm Coast, that we're helping to create that industrial and that commercial as we move west. So I just want to make sure that we're a little bit more firm in those certainties as we look at the future land use, the ratios of commercial to residential, which I think staff has worked on and hopefully we'll be hearing more about. But that basically is in a nutshell.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. To your point about conversion, yeah, I mean, it creates a huge amount of problems. One, it reduces the amount of available land for that, but then also it creates kind of consistency of use issues, right? So if something is converted to residential in a otherwise industrial zone, and now you want to put industrial right next to a residential, that creates problems, right? And so completely agree with that. My other question, though, and I think this is probably for the city attorney, was the DRIs and activation of the DRIs in terms of from the landowner. Do they have a requirement to do that? And I know DRIs are kind of a defunct state, methodology for defining development. What happens if they don't? Can they abandon them? Can they?
Yes, sir. Short version is yes, they can apply to abandon the DRI.
And what recourse does the city have to deny that?
Not much understanding the context of this particular DRI because no action's been taken, no developments occurred under the DRI. We would have, in my opinion, no ability to deny the abandonment.
So because they haven't started them, they can abandon them. But if they had
Well,
started
correct.
them, then
Even
we
if
would
they
have a
had started,
case.
they could still abandon, but you have some say-so in any mitigation
Mitigation of the
requirements
changes, yeah.
for the existing development that's already taken place, or if there's permits pending, that kind of thing.
And is there any examples or case law of cities attempting to deny the abandonment, and has that?
Well, the law changed in 2018, and part of my struggle with this is my brain was still thinking that there was a process, there used to be a process where you could deny an application to abandon. When they started doing away with DRIs, they did away with those rules as well and kind of were.
So they tossed it all out, and with that, even though
They
they're
got
kind of
tossed out with basically
grandfathered.
everything else, yes, sir.
Yeah, so the grandfather DRIs no longer have the rules for abandonment that used to exist.
Correct.
Okay.
So but if they abandon the DRIs, they're still going to have to come back to us to negotiate future land
They're
use.
still agricultural, right?
Right.
Aside
They're
from
still
those
have to
DRIs.
negotiate when it comes to getting their land use map changed and their zoning.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yep.
Anything else, Councilman? I'd also like to point out to the council, look at the airport. The airport is not an enclave anymore. It is on an island. So when we start talking about uses out at the airport, it's on an island, and that's a legal recourse for us, I do believe. That airport.
Inconsistent with the city use because it's in the middle of the city.
That
not controlled,
airport
yeah.
is Palm Coast. So, okay, Mr. Papa, please continue.
So
I just wanted to bring that.
no, I have a question about the map. Where on this map, and we may need to either zoom in or put on our super magnifying eyeglasses, but where on this map is the wastewater treatment plant 3?
Yes, it's right here.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, wait a minute.
That's north.
No, that's it.
It's almost on top, right?
Yeah. Well, actually,
Oh,
is
I'm
that,
sorry.
if you could point
Oh,
out
yeah,
both.
yeah, I'm sorry.
It's
Yes,
at
you're
the
right,
top
you're right.
end.
It's just north of this purple,
It's north of track
tract.
17?
It's just
Montieri,
north
did you
of
say
that.
2 or 3?
Both, actually. I'd like to know where both are, but I asked for 3, yeah. So 3 is, you said, north of that purple?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. The north boundary of that purple strip is PV grade. So just on the north side of PD.
Yeah, that's the one I was looking for. So
Yes, ma'am.
the land directly to the left of that, what is that zoned right now? I know it's DRI, but what is it zoned?
Well, currently, it's an unincorporated Flagler County.
That's the
Okay,
donut
so
hole.
that is, so that's county ag then?
Yes,
Right
ma'am.
now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And so all of this land is ag except for the DRIs, right?
Well, no, yeah, so the donut hole, this right here, this is county ag right now. They haven't annexed. All this is the DRIs, the Old Brick and the Neoga.
And then reverts to county ag if the DRIs are not. What is the base?
If they were,
land zone
yeah, if they were to
underneath the
abandon it,
DRIs? Yeah.
if they were to abandon DRI, what would it revert to?
Right?
Well, I don't want, I could really get myself in trouble here, but because I believe in our comp plan, the way that I read it is that because the DRI designation is reliant on the entitlements being in
Yeah.
the DRI development order, abandoning the DRI development order, and this is just my take, I'm not a legal person, that they lose basically they don't have any entitlements at that point, if you abandon the DRI DO. But
think-
I'm not,
Well, and you know, I'm learning a little bit on the fly on this yesterday, but the property, I understand there is no underlining zoning. DRI is the zoning designation that the
It-
city gave it along with the development order.
it's the future land use designation for the DRI. The DRI's future land use designation is DRI.
And the zoning is also DRI?
No,
or
the
there is no
zoning,
underlying?
the zoning has not been changed, except for Neoga Lakes, which has an MPD for it. But Old Brick Township retains the Flagler County zoning of ag and timberland.
Even the DRI that's inside the city. So
Right.
that, it would have whatever the underlying zoning would be the
So,
entitlement.
okay.
Asking was, does it revert to an underlying zoning, and that appears to be
But
ag?
at the same time, and you know, trust me, you're not the only municipality that's done this, but when you're annexing land like this, the rezoning, the comp plan amendment should be concurrent or very close behind it. It doesn't always happen, and so I think you can require that there be some type of change to your zoning category within your zoning code before you. So the idea that they have development rights under the county's zoning, you can require that they come in for rezoning, in my opinion, before they move forward. They can't submit a permit saying, I want to develop in accordance with the county regulations. I mean, in theory, they could, but I think you can put in the step that, hey, we got to get this rezoned to something that's consistent with our land development code.
They are annexed into the city. That's,
Right, so they
they're
should-
part of the city.
Yeah,
They're-
the 12,500 acres, right?
You're agreeing that you need to rezone and do comp plan amendments that are consistent with the municipality you annexed into.
Okay, and as far as the donut hole is concerned, it's open at the north end, but that, if they were to try to develop it under county, that would be consistent with it being an enclave, correct?
I'm unfamiliar with the donut hole. I haven't heard it said a lot, but
Well, it's that big, that's that big blank area right there in the,
yeah.
In the left.
That's a big hole.
Yeah.
So
It
that
looks more
would-
like a horseshoe.
that would be, would that be considered,
Never seen a donut there.
Me neither.
would that be considered an enclave?
It seems to have an opening at the north end there that might prevent it from being completely considered an enclave. It's not really closed in at the top end from what I
Well,
was.
well, it is closed in because that's a creek.
Well,
And it's-
geographically
and-
speaking,
and
but
the-
from a city boundaries, it doesn't appear to be an enclave. It's getting there, but
And it's the county line. And I think county just purchased some land up there to
They
close
did.
out that north end as conservation. So it's an enclave or an island, like the airport.
practically speaking, it may be. Legally speaking, I don't think
That's what
it
I
is.
think it too.
Okay,
We may think it is, but whatever
Yep.
the interpretation of the law.
okay, I just want to make sure we're straight going forward. All right, Mr. Papa, please continue if everyone's done up here. We're done up here? All right.
Just carrying on, and I don't really want to read word for word what the purpose of the master plan mixed use is, but I think it was, as we've discussed here, it was really designed to take into consideration this large new area west of the railroad tracks and to provide for something, a different type of, a vision for a different type of development than we have in the old, or I should say, east of the railroad tracks within the city of Palm Coast. I just want to highlight, I think the transportation network, again, they just want to call out that that a variety of mobility options is one of the objectives of having this designation, as well as using technology to improve mobility. And of course, connecting those different land uses that you will have west of the railroad tracks, whether it's residential, commercial, shopping, employment, all that being connected by this multimodal transportation network. And just summarizing in bullet points what policies fall under that objective, it does state within the proposed policies that the MPMU will only be implemented through a master plan development zoning. So that's what you have there. Within that MPD zoning, of course, you will have a development agreement, and part of that development agreement will be a map. And as part of that map, it is to depict the greenway overlay, the villages, the village centers, regional activity center, and employment center. And each of those, and I'll say that those land uses in quotes, greenway overlay, villages, village centers, regional activity center, employment centers, have definite, an overall idea of what land uses and what uses, zoning uses would be permitted within those designations. Within the policies, there's a list of elements that's to be considered as part of the greenway overlay, and those would be things that include like design guidelines and some review items that will need to be part of any MPD development agreement. What are your setbacks? What is your height? And things like that you typically would find in a land development code, but would be included within this development agreement, because essentially the way that we treat master plan development is that if there's a development agreement that's attached to a master plan development zoning, that agreement serves as the zoning code for that parcel. And if it's not covered within that development agreement, the hierarchy goes, then we would now refer to the land development code for items that are not covered. Like we have an example of, I think we have one MPD that does not include standards for signage. So the standards for signage that we refer to, we go back to the land development code, since it's not covered in the development agreement.
So just for clarity, what you're saying is that if it's not defined as different from our current land development code, then it's the standard is our land development code.
Yes, sir. That's a more succinct way of putting it. Thank you.
Sir, can we hold here for a second? Vice Mayor, I know in some of this language you had concern on the term employment center and things of that nature. Mm-hmm. That's written in our policy. Are you still concerned about that term, or are you okay with it the way it is?
Well, I think are we going to drill down on that specifically as we go along?
For my presentation, I was just trying to summarize each of the policies, but we could certainly go back and drill down if there are specific language that you'd like to see addressed.
So, yes, you're right. I do have some concerns with regards to the specifics of the commercial versus residential for these different terms, but I was going to just wait until they got through everything because I don't want to get ahead if they're
Okay.
going to address something, but I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'm zeroing in on that target.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, Mr. Papa, please
Yes, sir.
continue.
Thank you. Included within those policies, it describes the regionally significant transportation network and policies that basically talk about the overall residential density, which is 1.2 dwelling units per gross acre within that MPMU area. Regarding, there's an objective within the MPMU that speaks to the overall mix of uses. And these policies include within the MPD, you'll establish criteria for residential neighborhood, shopping, employment, education, recreation, civic facilities. You have at least 50% of the lands will be set aside for recreation open space. There's a minimum non-residential standard that build out as follows, and I believe this gets a little detailed into it. So the way that the policies read right now, that there is to be a minimum of 50 square feet of retail and service space per dwelling unit in the MPMU, and that retail service space will be found within a regional activity center, a village center, and or a neighborhood center. In addition to that 50 square feet, there's to be a minimum of 60 square feet of office/industrial space per dwelling unit. And I didn't put it here, but the office industrial space would be within a regional activity center and the employment center for that 60 square.
Okay, so if we could pause here. So a few things. Where it says at least 50% of the lands will be set aside for recreation and open space. Did we get rid of the requirement that or I guess the allowance that recreational space can be commercial in nature? Or is that still in here?
I believe it's still in here. It's still in here. Pardon?
Okay, so obviously without getting into the specifics that we all know about what is perhaps being proposed out west, my concern about the recreation being consumed by what can be commercial is that we're turning what should be something that is accessible to all families into something that is commercialized and inaccessible or unaffordable for many families. So it's my opinion that we should take out the policy that this recreation and open space can be commercial in nature, or that we say a certain percentage of open space needs to not be retention ponds and cannot be commercial in nature. So somehow we need to fix that. Otherwise, knowing what I know about what's proposed, I think we'll lose the intentions, the true intention behind having recreation and open space for everyday families.
I understand your concern about that, because my assumption is what you're saying is that, this 50% requirement will be met by some other things, right? And then there would no longer be parks, and things like that. So I think that's definitely something we could look at. I don't know what the standard is in terms of percentage of land use, what that looks like in Palm Coast proper. And obviously we probably feel like we need a little bit more than what's in Palm Coast proper, though we do have a lot of green spaces.
Yeah, we're
in certain
above
areas.
average than the rest of the state on that.
So, because I don't know what would be the standard in terms of what we would be looking for out there, I can't say specifically to right now. I think that probably would be something good for staff to look at and see what the consistent standard is out, throughout different areas, and what we want that future to look like in comparison to kind of what the standard is. Do we want it to be more restrictive or less restrictive?
Yeah, that's why I say I think we should just take it out, because then when the MPD comes before us, we can kind of drill down on that and get more specific. But again, we don't have this, it's consistent with the comp plan being held over our heads.
I get what you're saying, that if it's just gone, then
Then it gives us that true
It
flexibility.
wouldn't be defined. And then,
Right.
Yeah.
Mayor, if I can, just to try and put into context, what I read in the papers at least was, the project was something like 500 acres, right? And half of this land would be 10,000 acres. So you're talking a very small, what the policy says, right, is half should be open space and recreation, and that would be 10,000 acres. But the one individual project I read online was 500 acres, so.
No, I understand that, and I appreciate you pointing that out, but I know what else is projected.
I get your concern. That your concern is that all the commercial will eat up this percentage, right?
Yeah, a large portion of it, and the true intent of this will be lost. So I'm, I at one point was saying, because, I'm kind of trying to talk through this and be malleable and try to be, I don't want to handcuff anybody. I don't want to handcuff us. I don't want to handcuff the landowner. I want there to be certain restrictions, but not, I want them to be able to be creative, because I think there are some good things that can happen on this land.
Huge opportunity.
Yeah, but I do think we should just take that out. So not define it one way or another. And then when they come back with the MPD, we can drill down on that more specifically. But I don't want us to be handcuffed to that language. And obviously, I'm only one, but that's my position on that.
Yes. Mr. Papa, are we also going to get to, as we discussed in the last iteration on this here, was about the credits for green space? Or is that coming up?
I believe, I don't have that, you mean,
The wetland.
Yeah,
Wetland.
as far as, because there's a lot of land out there that they're not going to be able to use, and they're going to be given credit, and from what I read the last time we were in session was about how they're going to get credit for that land as part of this whole thing.
They will.
And, you can't use it, but we're going to give you credit for it. That doesn't seem,
I get you, but I mean, that's kind of consistent with development in general, right?
Yeah,
Is
that happens on all the DRIs.
Our lakes and parklands and, boardwalks that are occurring on wetland that are all, public use areas, once they're kind of developed as a park, are all things that no developer wanted to build on, so.
I mean, that's where a lot of our retention
I'm not
ponds
saying
are.
that that's not a good thought process. I'm just saying that I feel like some of these natural wetlands are ultimately going to be parks regardless, right? So,
we have to remember that it's Pringle Swamp, right?
Yeah, Pringle Creek.
A large portion of that out there.
So I just want to I want to put a bow on this. Can I get consensus from the board to just take out that one part of that policy that says that this recreation open space can be commercial in nature?
Yes, I have no problem with it. Councilman Gambaro, you good?
Yeah, I'm still thinking through it.
Well, it can be, we can readdress it later in the planning process, right?
Well, I don't want it in the comp plan.
Well,
I mean,
that's
yes.
what I'm saying, as far as when they come back
yeah,
to us.
you're
With the
talking about,
MPD.
because it's not defined, we can address it in the MPD.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we can come back to that, the council.
Let's digest that, and then we can talk about any other
Yeah,
issues we have.
the other part of this was the minimum 50 square feet versus, of office industrial. So to your point earlier, Councilman Gambaro, I don't see, what are we requiring as far as commercial versus residential in the employment centers? Because that's not listed here.
yeah.
Maybe on the next slide.
In the
Yeah,
actual comp plan.
so under, the way the policy is written right now, and when it describes the employment center, it does not, there's no numbers attached to, like, within an employment center, it's X amount of residential and Y amount of non-residential uses. That's not within the policy that we have, that's written right now. It just describes what an employment center is and what uses may be found within an employment center.
So there's no definition of kind of the ratio. Is that what you're asking, commercial and industrial, Vice Mayor?
Yeah, so if you go back to the prior, when we were here last time on the comp plan, the employment center, it has a definition, obviously, but it says, it shall include a mixture of office, civic, institutional, industrial, warehouse, supporting retail, supporting residential, and/or other similar uses. I don't know why we don't have a ratio requirement like we do for the activity center, village center, and neighborhood centers, particularly when it comes to the industrial, because here's one of my huge holdups about this is right now in those DRIs, there is designated industrial space. It's in there right now. So if they come back and, I should say when they come back and apply for this to be the MPMU, and they say, oh, well, over here is going to be this great employment center where we can have all this industrial, there's nothing saying they have to have a certain amount. Furthermore, there's nothing even saying they have to have industrial, because it's an or, right? So even when we look at the minimum square feet, it says retail service space per dwelling unit, doesn't say industrial. The minimum 60 square feet of office industrial space per dwelling unit, where is that? That should be in the employment center. If the intent of the employment center, excuse me, is to encourage these uses, because that's what it says. It says, this will provide economic development opportunities and encourage the location of jobs within close proximity to the multimodal transportation network. I totally agree with that. We're talking about the multimodal transportation network, say that 5 times fast, and that's the railroad, right? We're talking about the spur. Okay, then say in that area, we have to have 60 square feet per residential of industrial. I want to be flexible. I don't want to hand them the keys to the city. We need industrial.
And even if we get the industrial designation, we still have to deal with the live local and involuntary rezoning to, if they're dedicating a certain, the 40% or 35% to.
Yeah, well, my understanding is we can avoid that, council, by the MPD process. Is that right? Because we're an MPD city? We can avoid live
local because of that? No, not entirely.
No.
not entirely, okay.
But we have to look at what just happened with, over off of
Old Kings, yeah.
Old Kings. And I'm going to make a proposal later on. So that's the kind of things we're dealing with. We got a plot of land that they're going to be able to develop probably in the worst intersection area of the city as far as traffic right now, because we haven't begun work on Old Kings Road and that intersection coming over to, it's horrible over there. And here we are, we have to go along with it because it falls under Live Local.
So-
Even, I am grateful that, they have to dedicate, the retail space and the 30-year affordable housing component, but still, if they were to start building on that like today, it would be overwhelming as soon as they finish.
It's going to be a problem because
Yeah.
obviously we're just starting the planning phase of Old King, so that's going to take a while as well. To the point, and obviously the opportunity is there for conversion of Live Local. I wonder if you don't see that type of action or behavior from developers until you're getting closer to 100% build out, because you don't have maybe that residential land available, so then they purchase something else and convert it. And I know that industrial potentially is cheaper, so I get that maybe the thought process there is that buying industrial and then converting it under Live Local is the action. I'm just trying to think through the processes for
Well,
why
they
they do.
get tax breaks on it too.
Yeah.
So they don't pay the same taxes on it. I mean, there's all kinds of,
Benefits.
and it's going to get
them.
worse. I mean, you should
Yeah.
see the things in the pipeline from the legislator. It's crazy.
Just
Papa?
going back to this, I wanted to try and put you all on the same page. On page 50 of your packet is that policy, Vice Mayor, you were referencing, which is 1.7.2.2, which is B, Workplace and Employment Center, and maybe staff has a recommendation as a solution.
Yeah, so my question that I was getting ready to ask was, how did we come up with the number 60? Seems kind of small, doesn't it? For what we're trying
Well,
to
I
do.
don't
That's
know.
a really good point, and I will tell you, we compared currently what is required in the DRIs for this type of use versus what would be in the MPMU. It is much smaller, much smaller. We are requiring much less commercial per dwelling unit than what would be required under the current DRI. So I had spoken with staff and asked for a proposal. How do we get closer to what the current requirements are in the DRI? So I looked to staff, as Councilman Gambaro just posed, what's the recommendation to make this? I'm not saying we need to be all the way there, because to the landowner's credit, and to staff's credit, the overall residential per square feet on the MPMU is less. But they're annexing in a whole lot more land, so it's going to, the net result is going to be more residential units. Okay, let's not hide the ball on that.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
obvious, right?
Right, but the overall residential unit per acre is going to go down, so that's a good thing, but we need to make sure that the amount, in my opinion, the amount of industrial space and commercial is closer to what would be required in the DRI. Right now, it's vastly different.
So what's your recommendation?
Yeah, I don't know what the standard there is.
I mean, is there, I
I
mean,
think maybe we have we've drafted some language that addresses that. Maybe we'd like to present it at the end, or do you want to do it now?
I would say now's a better,
Okay,
there's no better time than now.
All right, I'll have to.
yeah, walk us through your recommendations.
Okay, essentially, instead of, we're proposing that rather than the minimum of 60 square feet, we're going to recommend a minimum of 100 square feet with at least 50% of that 100 square feet being for industrial space.
Beautiful.
There you go.
I mean, this is what we want, right? We want commercial and industrial, so I think everybody here is probably on board with that.
It's not employment center, it's commercial industrial, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
no,
it's-
and
it's
that was
very
gonna be my-
specific wording, right? So,
Yeah, and that was gonna be my next question. So in what, I don't even know what you call these, villages, employment centers, pods, that's what I've been calling them. And what areas are these required?
Sure. Really the only change we made, the policy 1.7.2, policy 1.7.2.2B, workplace employment center. At a minimum, 60 square feet of workplace space per dwelling unit designed to serve the development shall be planned for in neighborhood centers, village centers, employment center, and/or regional activity center, with this standard measured in the aggregate across these areas. Workplace space can include office, health, industrial, and similar uses. So the proposed amendment is that it goes from the 60 goes to 100, with the caveat that at least 50% will be industrial, so they can go higher, certainly. But we did not change where it could go and what would count towards that requirement of 100. If you put 50,000 square feet of industrial in a village center, that would count towards the 100 square feet. 100 square feet that's required by this policy.
But we would have the opportunity to negotiate that within the MPD.
Correct.
And you can certainly,
Location for specifics of where that's going.
sure, yeah, within an MP.
Realistically, the landowner's not going to do that. I don't think that they're gonna
Yeah,
say,
they
hey,
don't-
we
they're-
wanna.
They're gonna devalue their own land.
Correct. I mean, I think
Right.
they're obviously, they want the MPMU for a reason, right? They want to be able to kind of place things the way they want, but I'm thrilled with that. That satisfies my concerns.
I think that's a win, right?
We good to go?
I think we're good on that.
We're good on that.
We're G to G.
What
Let's
other
go.
recommendations do you have?
Job staff.
All right, why don't we start with that?
We did have, we're just trying to clarify about, when you look through the policy language, is it going to be one MPD or a series of smaller MPDs? And I think we're just trying to tighten that up to the point that we know what we're going to get in the initial application. Your MPD needs to cover everything. The entire 20,000 acres or whatever.
So instead of I'm sorry.
And then probably eventually, you would need to amend that MPD when you come in with like a larger chunk of, let's say, 500 acres, or in order to get more specific about the rules for that 500 acres. Just as an example.
No, Jose said it well. It's just, as far as us as monitoring it and be able to get a handle on the development agreement, it's best that they do one master plan development agreement, and then, because it's a 25-year plan, and then they would come in to make modifications to that initial master MPD. They go through the same process. You don't want a bunch of little separate documents all around for this planned area. We want a concise smart planned development. So having one initial and then having one document that controls that entire area makes a lot of logical sense.
For the annex piece, they're coming in as county ag, which is what, one dwelling unit per 5 acres?
I believe so. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. We don't have, obviously, a land use designation called county ag. So if they come in annex, then they have to go through a rezoning, right? And I maybe look to legal counsel. I guess what are they entitled to anything, as if we say, we'll annex you in, and then they go through that rezoning process? Are they, in quote, entitled to anything as far as their zoning?
No, they're not entitled to anything until they get through the process. I'll say that, typically, again, when you're annexing, there's an idea of what they hope to change the future land use and the
Right.
zoning to going into that annexation process. And you really should be even having concurrent hearings on that, to be honest.
And I think that's the intent. Well, let me ask you this, and staff. So what is the closest designation that we have right now? Would it be rural or low density? What would the closest be?
Zoning?
Zoning?
We have an agricultural zone.
Yeah.
We do. Okay. And what's that development?
It is one, within that, 1 per 5, I believe.
It is still. Okay.
Yeah.
So is it the same as county? Because that's the county. And I only ask because, obviously when they go through the change, the zoning change, the question is, what do you currently have versus what are you trying to get? So do we confirm it's 1 per 5 acres?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
I've got a procedural question. So with regards to what we just agreed on the 100 square foot, does that require us to go back to planning board? I'm assuming not, but I just need to confirm.
I believe we've, as staff, we've agreed that any substantial change, and I believe that one would be a fairly substantial change.
You think it's
we-
substantial?
We would go to the planning board.
Okay.
I believe it's more, for us, it's more about the public process. We are changing the comprehensive plan and to provide the opportunity for our residents and interested parties to comment.
I think that actually only improves what we're doing here today, because I think there's a lot of angst in our community about the westward expansion. And so I think if the public understands that we are not, I think there's a misconception, and they probably have a little PTSD from the last few years, that we're just building out or going west to put in a bunch more homes, when the truth of the matter is we don't have enough space for industrial and commercial and things like that in current Palm Coast. So I think if the more we're in front of the public telling them, hey, we're trying to make this better, we're trying to improve the situation that we currently have, that only helps the process.
Okay. I just wanted to ask that question from a procedural matter. I mean, all these changes we're going through, so you think that's substantial? We have to go back to planning board for that one. That's your recommendation? Okay. Do you all agree? Okay.
Yeah.
You good to go? Ready
Oh,
for Mr.
yes.
Papa to continue?
I believe that's really all we had regarding the MPMU. Again, there are specific details on language that you have within the policies. We will we'll entertain those. But the next item or next element has to do with housing. And I believe at the last workshop, I really went through most of these slides already. Even in the introductory today, we talked about the housing, how we want to view the housing element and housing in the city as an opportunity for everyone, regardless of income, regardless of the family or life stage that you're in, but providing those opportunities for you, if you're a new nurse or a new deputy coming into the city, that you will have an opportunity to find the housing that you want. Some might prefer rental, some might prefer to look for a starter home, but I think the overall objective, if I was to give a summary of the housing element, would be that we would, as a city, provide those opportunities, that you as a new graduate or new resident, no matter what stage you're in, you would have an opportunity to find housing.
So a
Right.
range of price points and affordability.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Diversity of housing.
I beg your pardon, Mayor?
Diversity of housing.
Yes, sir. Diversity of housing, that's the summary. So, you know, and again, when we went through our community outreach, we heard a lot of those same things. And there's a range here. See, just look at the housing types. Tiny homes on zero lot line homes, senior apartments. Of course, you always have different points of view about how that housing should come. Not a lot of apartments. I'm not sure if that was a comment that there's not a lot of apartments available, or moving forward, we should have less apartments. Apartments in town center, and I'm just picking and choosing here, but and that's what we're getting right now. Quiet neighborhoods, more affordable housing options, and again, just the diversity of housing and the housing opportunities. If you'd like, I can go through some of the background here, and this is, what is this? Okay, this is a snapshot of.
Current.
No, it's
This is
2022.
From
Well, I mean,
2022, yes, sir, again, since we
Yeah, but
started
that's
the
2022.
data analysis about 2 years ago. As you can see, the majority of the housing inventory in the city is single-family detached units. That's about 89%. We have about 33% of those homeowners with a mortgage on their home that spend more than 30% on housing, and that includes utilities. 49% of renters spend more than 30% of their income on housing. And 62% of all renters earn less than 100% of the area median income. And 78% of occupied units are owner-owned, with 23% are renter-owned. So even some, of course, that gets into that some of your single-family inventory is rented rather than homesteaded or owned with a mortgage by another owner.
One thing I do want to point out, 2023 was a crazy year for building here. There are a lot of changes in if you go back to our utility rate, that bar chart that showed what was projected versus what actually happened, it goes way up in 2023. So, you know, I would like to see what these numbers look like with the 2023 numbers included. So I recognize the figures you put in front of us, but I do think that there needs to be a little bit of recognition that 2023 was quite the year here for building additional dwelling units. Particularly, I mean, obviously, we always build a lot of the ITT lots, but if you look at the difference between the platted and the multifamily versus the ITT in the utility rate study, there is a larger dichotomy there as well. So there were still a lot of ITT lots, but that difference was larger than in other years as well, so.
Gotcha.
Certainly.
So for instance, I think I recently saw, I think on average, we're doing about 1,200 COs or something around there, and probably 75 to 80% are ITT platted lots. So that year was different specifically.
2023 was different, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I believe we've gone through some of these objectives before. Again, the overall goal of promoting housing options for all income levels, and that objective would be to make adequate and affordable housing opportunities, again, regardless of income and family situation. We have a policy in there to continue to work with state and federal funding to implement our housing programs, seeking funding from these programs to assist our residents. Typically, those fundings have been used, as we've all previously discussed, for like a first-time home buyer program and housing rehab for those who are, with either of those programs, there is an income. The one thing is the income threshold that has to be met in order to be eligible to receive assistance through the program. I think one of the goals here is that, to maintain the existing housing stock and protecting the residential areas. and in 2022, about 45% of our housing stock was built before 2000. So that would make it yes, older than 22 years old. And of course, those are the homes that start to have some more significant rehab issues, roof, AC, water heaters, or maybe even water damage inside the home. So certainly maintaining, being able to provide an assistance program for rehab is important in helping us to maintain our housing stock and keeping the quality of life in our neighborhoods. And I believe I covered these. Was one objective that I'd like to cover, 332, is just protecting the residential areas from incompatible land uses. And so the objective there is just to protect these predominantly residential areas from intrusion of incompatible or more intensive land uses. And looking at a number of different strategies to do that, such as a greater setback and bufferings. Maybe tightening up the criteria that we use when we have a rezoning application that would intensify the use adjacent to an established single-family dwelling unit. And these are all changes that would come as we update our land development code. That we establish the policies here in the comprehensive plan, and of course the next step, as Ray has mentioned many times before, is that we would need to update our land development code in order to implement some of these policies. And so that's where that would come. The details of what those buffers, what the greater buffers would be, or what the greater tree protection will be, will come when we update the land development code. And again, we get back into the diversity of in housing. Just to provide you with a background from the last, again, 2018 to 2022 American Community Survey, which is produced by the U.S. Census Bureau. Again, majority of our units are single-family detached. Less than 5.5% of the units in the city are in multifamily buildings of 3 or more units. So, that's provided there. And to look at the trend between 2010 and 2022 for household growth, the fastest growing cohort in terms of household would be the 65 plus age cohort, which grew from about 33% of our overall households in the city in 2010 to about 42% of all households in 2022. So that's a growth of 8.3%. And the other households, although there might have been an increase in the raw numbers, like let's just pick on the householder age cohort between 25 and 44 years. There were 7,027 of such households in 2010. In 2022, there was 7,660. So although there was a rise in the numbers in terms of its overall share of households within the city, it is a decrease of about 4.5%. So we can look at these data and statistics. And
I think something that stands out to me is that, despite the percentage, the mix, your 25 years and younger has decreased over that time. And in a time when we're building more houses than ever, someone that's a young person, it's obviously become more difficult to own a home in Palm Coast.
And so this is really more of a wrap-up, although encompassed in Goal 3.4, to allow a variety of lot sizes and housing types to meet the needs of the citizenry through all stages of life. And from that, we got the response during our community engagement regarding affordability, again, diversity, having public transportation and having that tied to housing affordability, finding room for entry-level housing, and the big one was again, the apartments in town center. And that concludes our presentation. I know that, and here staff looks,
Thank you, Mr. Papa. So have we stripped out that additional dwelling? We've
That's,
stripped that?
yeah, so that's policy 3.1.1.6 that allows for, in A, density bonuses for developments that include a percentage of affordable units, and allowance of greater densities for the, quote, missing middle housing in single-family zoning districts.
Which number was that? I'm sorry.
It's policy 3.1.1.6. It's on,
37,
yeah, I don't have page numbers.
37.
37.
So we stripped that?
I'm not a fan of that. I think that we're already going to be increasing the dwelling units, particularly in the westward expansion. Presumably, that's what they're going for. We know that. They're going to ask for an increase overall with that annex piece than what will be allowed out there now. I don't want to allow density bonuses.
You mean an increase in density or an increase in, not what you're asking right now, but when you were saying that they're going to be increasing units, you mean units or density?
Okay.
Sorry,
I see what you're
I-
saying. No,
I
no, I got it.
wasn't sure if we're
They're
talking
go-
about
they're
a
going to
denser
be-
area.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
they're going to be, so right now, they're entitled to what, 12,000 plus dwelling units out there, right?
within the DRIs,
Within the
yes.
DRIs, yeah. With that annex piece, I believe that they're going to be asking for around 20,000 dwelling units for the total piece, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, what would their allowable units would be about 24,000.
24,000.
At 1.2 dwelling units per gross acre.
Okay, so a lot, a lot more than currently with the DRIs and without that annex piece. So I don't think that density bonuses should, particularly, we know that the state already has some legislation that may be forcing our hands on density as well. So it'd be my position to nix those density bonuses for affordable, both A and C, for affordable units and missing middle. I'm 100% in favor of looking at the LDC for design and construction ways to make homes more affordable, particularly when we're talking about fee simple ownership. I am not a fan of saying, let's have $1,600 apartment units that we can sandwich a bunch of people in and woo them with and not help them towards home ownership. Let's help them get a fee simple home ownership by looking at our LDC, but I'm not in favor of density bonuses.
Vice Mayor, or anybody, missing middle, I'm confused by that term. I'm not sure.
The missing.
Could we get some definition of what this means?
And am I not, I'll try to describe it.
It may be an industry standard term that
Yeah.
I don't know, but I just want to kind of understand what this passage means in general.
Yeah, to me, the missing middle is really more of a description of trying to intersperse like what appears to be a single-family home between other single-family homes. But that home itself might be a triplex or a quadruplex. But the design itself makes it appear to be just another. To me, that's the missing middle.
Okay, so
But
it's
it's a very elementary description.
multifamily, but the appearance is consistent with single-family
Yes.
neighborhoods. That's what we're talking about here. Okay, I mean,
I'm a fan of that. What I'm not a fan of is the language greater densities. So if we can massage that language to where it doesn't look like we're allowing more units, I 100% agree with the concept of interspersing duplexes and things like that in with single-family homes. We have that now on our ITT lots, and I think it's great because you do have a diversity of that housing, but I don't want this to be read that we're allowing for extra dwelling units, essentially, if they intersperse them in the missing middle. That's what I don't want this to read like.
Vice Mayor, if I can propose, similar to the last conversation that we had about, and we didn't come back to that yet, but, rather than defining it and maybe missing a little bit on that definition of our intent, maybe removing that would be kind of a better version, and then again, in the MPD, define exactly where these different types of housing should occur.
Yeah, I'm in favor of removing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Removing it altogether? Okay.
So maybe
A
I'm on-
and-
maybe
A and
I'm on
C.
the- maybe I'm on the wrong page. I'm talking about the single-family home with additional dwelling unit. Have we
No, that's
stripped
an
that out?
accessory unit.
That's
That's
Yeah, have
different.
we
different.
stripped that out?
I don't know, but that's, yeah, that's a different policy.
Have we stripped that out? I think we had that conversation before.
That's B, Mayor.
Say again?
It's B under that same policy.
So question, just so I understand,
I think that's an LDC thing.
what's our drawbacks for accessory dwelling units?
Because we're going to run in, well, we just went through that with the STR. And I kind of understand it because you have multi-generational families.
Yeah, you have valid uses for these.
I had
so
mentioned that before, like the mother-in-law or in-law suite.
You want a man cave by your pool or something like that,
Yeah, but the problem we run into
I'm just saying,
is,
that's what I would use that for.
the problem we will run into, I'm almost certain of it, is
Running them out.
renting them out as short-term rentals.
Well, I think
And-
we can define that, right?
What you
As a
mean?
policy.
That you can't do it?
Yeah.
Well, we'll have to see, but that's all in the future. It's just,
No, and I get you. That's what I'm saying, is that if there are valid uses for it,
Yeah.
I don't want to just throw it all out.
so it's still in there.
If our concerns are the rental portion of it, then maybe we can do something to define that.
Outlaw it.
Right. Yeah.
Forbid it.
I'm of the position that this is an LDC issue. I don't think this should be in the comp plan. This is getting, in my opinion, more granular than what the intent of the comp plan is. I think if you put something that's very, high level, that says, to allow for, creative design concepts in the creation of housing, to help this, to promote life stage housing, to me, that general umbrella kind of envelops all this, and I'm fairly certain that kind of language is already in other places in the comp plan, so I don't even know that, we need A, B, or C to be in here.
Well, if it's in there, it's going to be used in litigating any proposals.
Well, that's what I'm saying, to take it out, yeah.
So I would just add that, again, this is a strategic document, right? We are way down in the weeds on some of these issues, and if it's easier to take it out so we can move forward, let's do it.
Strip it, that one?
I'm fine with taking
Okay.
that out. I don't think taking it out precludes the future use of accessory.
Because it doesn't define it, right?
Correct.
So then that's part of the things we will define in the MPD, or it'll revert to our specific code,
The
right?
LDC is where it would be, yeah.
So,
Okay, so we have consensus on that? I'm sorry, Mr. Tyner, go right ahead.
yeah, I was just going to add, absolutely, we can take out A, B, and C. And I just want to highlight that 3116, it really is a may in there. It's not a shall, it's a may consider. So taking those three out and leaving D, E, and F in just as some examples, because just like you said, we would come back with our land development code to highlight, after we do the study, to highlight any potential changes. And just like Councilmember Pontieri indicated, maybe design standards is where we go and those type of things. So we could deck out the three. That's fine.
That's a good point, though. I did not notice that it's a may versus shall, so it doesn't mean that we have to. It means that we can consider it, right?
Yeah, I think taking those three out, and keeping with those last three is really the way to go, because it says innovative land development regulations established through zoning and through the MPD. And then other regulations intended to reduce building and developmental costs, which is when, we talk about the single car garages and things like that. So I think that accomplishes the goal that we all are looking for.
I think if we find ourselves pole vaulting over mouse turds, we should just take it out. Yeah. But
Okay.
we're, again, strategic documents, and most strategic documents, when you turn them in, it's an 80% solution to be sorted out, amended, and we have the mechanism, as a council, to take another bite at that apple, so.
We're only one council, and things are going to change, and
Yeah, but-
Councilman Gambaro,
Mr. Mayor, they can sorry to interrupt, but
You've done a lot of operations and, you know, and been part of a lot of garrisons and stuff, but usually people that, they got the comprehensive plan, you know, put it on the shelf, knock off the dust when it's time to renew it. Because that's just, you know, that's the way it functioned. I had a comprehensive plan that said, the SAF chief will control all operations during any natural disasters, whatever. It took me 3 days to find out who the SAF chief was.
Right, right. Now, I was referencing, you know, like the national security strategy, you know, that kind of stuff. I mean, this is how I'm correlating it to what we're doing. And so, but to your point, plans do get shelved, but I think, you know, for our task is to try to find a way to get this thing approved.
Yeah.
If we find ourselves pole vaulting over mouth charges, let's just take it out and move out.
I think we're good. We got consensus on that?
yeah, I
We
think
move
so.
that?
To the point though about, you know, councils change, you know, if the council changes and the direction changes in the future, they'll have the ability to change this comp plan anyway. So the reality is yeah, everything can change based on who's up here, so.
I personally, I can't say we, I personally want it as difficult as possible for developers to take advantage of our city and our residents. That's my whole objective, because I feel the city has been taken advantage of, and it continues to be taken
Yeah,
advantage of.
we need to be in a situation to where everybody is gaining from this rather than one side more than the other.
And I don't want someone to have a document that can say, well, you said it then, 3 councils ago, that we can do it like this. I don't.
Yeah.
Okay, are we good? That's it?
Mayor, if you don't mind, let me just summarize all that was said today so that we know our marching orders appropriately. So
Heard those cats. City manager.
your map is going to be the 2035 map, was agreed upon. We're going to look at language for when it comes back to you for second reading on the open space requirement in the MPMU. The specific there was to remove the such usage may be commercial in nature. So we'll revisit that and then get you that back for the second read. And then policy 1.7.2.2, we're expanding the minimum square feet of commercial, or I'm sorry, of the work employment centers. And then we're taking and adding industrial usage shall compose a minimum of 50%. In the housing element, we're removing 3.1.1.6 A, B, and C. And then for staff, we're working on if we are going to come back to planning board either March 19th. We just need to look at the advertising requirement. I think I covered everything that you guys kind of talked through. 3.116, yep, remove. Yep, and it's A, B, and C in the housing element.
So the only thing left on the table is the open space and recreation. Where are we coming down on that?
That's 1.7.3.
So I just want to make sure we came to a decision, because it
I'm
felt
okay
like
with
that,
that.
okay. It felt,
Oh, so
Okay.
we're removing it, correct?
yes.
Right, so it's not essentially so that it's either, we could do it 2 ways, but I would advocate for removing it because that just leaves us open to flexibility and kind of defining it later. But the other way is to remove the commercial recreation component of that 50%. So to me, I'm fine with either.
Yeah,
It preserves decision space for us.
right. Okay, I just wanted, because I didn't want to,
I wanted to talk through it a little bit
Yeah.
more, but thanks for coming,
Yep.
bringing it back.
So we're good?
I think we're good.
good.
All right.
Okay, so we're going to try and hit the March 19th planning board. Oh, sorry, no,
Yeah, we
we're not going to
probably
make
won't
that.
be able to meet March.
Okay,
We'll-
then the
we'll-
next-
We'll look at the schedule and
The next one will be
Yeah.
April 16th.
possibly April, yes.
Okay,
And we have till July to get it done, but certainly we want to,
yes, well, because you're talking about wanting to move a lot of changes in the LDC, and our consultant, JB Pro, Miss Kathy, and her associate, Chris, I believe is, I'm sorry, Nick, sorry, Nick. Nick is in the back, and, you know, a lot of those changes you were talking about in the LDC, they're here to help us and get ready for that next process, but we've got to get through the comp plan first.
Okay.
Dominoes.
Are we done? We good to go?
No,
We G to G?
I think we are on this topic. I just, you know, over the last several weeks, we've gone through the annexation of the property next to BJ's, And, you know, as we continue to engage on these issues from an operational perspective, it makes a lot of sense to you know, annex into the city once, tie in utilities, you know, and things of that nature. And so kind of in that mindset, I think it's really important that we as a city and the city council own the development of the westward expansion, you know, and as we're laying this out through the comp plan, I don't want the county to own this. I think this is an important project for our city that has a lot of implications, both for our growth, but I think economically, as we're trying to put a focus on economic development, I think it's critically important. But from an operational perspective, owning this thing from the front and seeing it to its fruition is, you know, its establishment, I think it's from my perspective, the way to go. And I think this puts us on a path to do that. Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, staff, for all of the hard work. Greatly appreciate your diligence and
Thank you.
follow through
Hope
on
we're not
this.
keeping you up at
Thank you
night.
for bearing with us, you know,
I know,
as we
thank
work it out as well.
Yeah.
You guys stay put for a second. We're going to open this up for public discussion. Seeing no one come forward, we're going to close public discussion on this matter. We'll move on to discussion by City Council of matters not on the agenda. We can start with you, Mr. Gambaro.
I just want to thank this council's support again in the establishment of the baby box at Fire Station 25. And for the general public, the Knights are going to be presenting a check for their, you know, what they're going to pay for this installation at noon today. And so we look forward to getting that moving forward. And thanks to the city clerk and the attorney and the staff that moved quickly earlier this week to ensure that the agreements were all signed and put into place. So thank you for that. And that's it. It's been a great discussion. It's been great to just plow through a lot of these issues this week, not only with the city, but also in conjunction with the county. So I look at other municipalities and counties and how they engage with each other, and it's not as friendly. I think we're all focused on trying to do the right thing. So thanks for your professionalism as we move forward.
Okay, thank you, Councilman. Councilman Miller?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I think Vice Mayor and Councilman Gambaro pointed out yesterday at the Joint Counties Public Safety brief that I neglected to say go Gators, so
Go Gators.
I just wanted to make sure I got that in. The Florida Gators beat number 7 Alabama this week in basketball and are on track to be a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament, so just wanted to put that on the record.
I would like to move to give a little soundtrack to Councilman Miller. We should go da-da-da, before his council comments. No, I have nothing. Thank you all for the discussion and the collaboration.
I thought you were going to mention UCF.
What? Does
I
you
don't
feel-
know what that means.
Okay, I'm so grateful that we have added an extra meeting so we can sit and discuss things as we should be able to in sunshine. I would like to discuss, now we are being beat up in the public about this rate increase for utilities. And we are, as I said before, even starting the campaign, we are in an inflection point in the history of this city. And I think right now, and it's just me, but I've been here 19 years. We as residents are paying for a lot of mistakes in the past. And we can go back to, I wish Helena was here. If you could get her down here, that'd be nice. City Manager, how much debt are we still paying for from when we first bought the wastewater and water treatment facilities?
The original purchase.
The original purchase.
So I can tell you that the total collection of our long-term debt schedule is $155,289,991. That's principal and interest that's in our long-term debt.
Okay.
Some of that's been
Right.
CIP.
Refinanced. And
Right, and the city has, did acquire additional debt through, adding and expanding different facilities. So, you know, over the time since the city has acquired the utility, that is our total outstanding debt.
Okay. So so a good way to surmise this is we have been in debt as far as water, wastewater, since the inception of this city. Is that an accurate statement? And we are currently still paying on that debt.
Yes,
Is
sir.
that an accurate statement? Okay. So that's since 1999.
Yeah, and I didn't know that, Mr. Mayor. That was a good,
2003.
when you brought it up a few weeks back.
2003. And I would go as far as to say when ITT sold the water system to that utility company for $25 million. And this is something that came from Pierre. I'll give Pierre a plug on this one, and we can try to figure out if it's a true statement. Mr. De Lorenzo, can you come up too? I'm going to have some questions for you. Let's see.
Good morning, Mayor, City Council.
Thank you. Let me find it. I'm sorry. I should have pulled this up prior. When I posed a question some time ago about how much we paid for the wastewater and water treatment facility, Pierre felt that he should contact me with a little tidbit of information. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Believe it or not, I talk to Pierre every now and again. Let me get to it. I don't want to hold everybody up. Okay, so we paid, they sold the water waste and water treatment facility and all the components for $25 million in 1999. And Pierre said, plus $1,000 every time there was a hookup until 2007.
They got royalties on
Pretty much, yeah.
essentially future,
And the worst part of it is, that was 1999, $25 million
yeah.
when they sold it. We bought it in 2003 for $83 million, plus an additional like $20 million to get it up to standard because it was garbage when we bought it. They had done nothing to it. Correct, City Manager?
That's what I've been told.
So we have been in the hole since our inception as a city, as far as water is concerned. And it's ridiculous. And everybody that's lived here for more than a minute knows that an average household like mine, $165 a month for your city utilities is completely ridiculous. So we are never going to dig out of this hole. Mr. De Lorenzo, how many houses do we currently have in the queue in the city?
Houses?
How many
Houses or lots, sir?
No, I'm sorry.
Permits.
How many housing units do we have in the queue for the city?
Lots that are ready to be built on?
That are in the planning process from
Yeah.
the initial application
Very,
to include infill lots. We know there's 8,000 infill lots, correct?
7,500 or so, yes.
Right around 8,000. So how many housing units do we have in the queue somewhere along the development
I
process?
think,
That have been approved, let's put it like that.
yeah, it's, we'd analyzed that recently, and I believe it was 19,
About
19,000.
approximately 19,000. We have the data. That includes the DRIs, all of them, or just the ones that are under construction?
right, just the ones that are.
So
active.
not the western DRIs, right? Not the western DRIs because there's no infrastructure for them to start building anything. But the eastern DRIs are included. So, yeah, which would include the maximum yield from those, not necessarily the development pattern once they went through it, but roughly 19,000.
19,000 housing units. And we're proposing 2 bonds to bring just to catch up. Because as it stands right now, if all those units were online today, would we be able to support them?
The 19,000?
Yes.
Oh, no, sir.
Okay.
No,
So
just
once-
like when, when ITT started, they platted 45,000 lots and a 2 million gallon, because you try to time it with your development, so everyone is paying an equitable share.
So once we get, all things considered, if we were to get to the capacity that we're looking for with all these bonds that we are going to have issued, the 2 bonds, would we have enough water and wastewater to sustain those houses? Once those other 19, if they came fully online?
No, sir.
Okay. So everyone sees our dilemma here? We are never going to catch up, and it's always going to fall on the backs of our residents. So, and we've only had one read of that ordinance for increasing the water rates. So, and that was a 3-1 vote. So I can tell you right now in open forum, when we come back for the second vote on that, I will be a no vote. Unless we put in a building moratorium on residential housing. We are not going to keep building on something that we can't sustain and putting it on the back of our residents. They don't deserve it. I don't deserve it. Nobody in this room deserves it. So either the developers are going to start doing industrial growth to bring in jobs to offset our tax base, or we're going to stop building houses altogether. And I would say, when I propose it, I'm going to say to a date uncertain. Now, I know I'm going to get pushback because, we can't stop building, we can't stop building. Well, if we don't stop building, we're going to be broke, and we're going to force lifetime residents of Florida and Flagler County to flee their homes because they cannot afford to live in this state anymore. Plain and simple. So we are, like I said, we are at an inflection point, and we need to fix it. And we are done with the storming as far as a council. We are in the norming. So we need to establish norms and do what's best for this city. And as Councilman Miller stated last week, or it was this week, he's not worried about re-election. I'm not either. I'm a resident. I've lived in Palm Coast longer than I've lived anywhere in my life. And I'm not going to put up with it. And I'm not going to be berated every day saying I'm in the pocket of developers, which I have never been. I'm going to do what's right for this city. And we are at an inflection point, and we are going to have to make those decisions. We are only 4 people making all these decisions for this city. And we are going to do what's right, or the ship's going to go down, all of us on it. We're all going to be playing the fiddle on the deck of the Titanic. And we have a fairly low tax, and we have to do what's right for our city. So I'd look for y'all's input, please.
So, Mr. Mayor, thanks for sharing your thoughts on that. I think it's important that we all, share our perspectives, and, I think everybody's been catching a ton of heat, on how our meeting went this week, and that's okay. We want to hear that feedback. That's why we have the different reads. But I'm going to go back to a slide that was presented a long time ago with regards to the bonds and the costs associated with the improvements that we all know that we need to go do. All right, so the utility rate, the actual bond is going to pay for 40% of the improvements that we need. And it's kind of laid out, and Carl did a good job this week kind of laying it out by project. 60% of it is going to be paid by impact fees from new development.
I think you inverted it.
No, that's not,
40%.
respectfully, I don't think that's right.
40%
I'm gonna
is
look
impact.
now.
40%
Yeah,
is
please,
impact
I mean,
fees, 60% is from residents.
It's the famous money slide that we talked months ago.
But basically, what's going on in this city, it is a Ponzi scheme for more development. We are never going to dig out of this hole. So I could say 10 years from now, just 10 years from now, your water bill is going to be $500.
I mean, I don't know about that. I guess my point is, if you place a moratorium in place, you're going to not enable our city to fix these projects. Okay, it's not all bond. These impact fees play a major role in our ability to move forward. And so that's one. And then the impact on skilled workers, laborers in our community. Do we put them out of work by doing this?
Well-
I mean, do we create an unemployment issue, Mr. Mayor, for our community?
We have 19,000 units in the queue. And impact fees are not collected until when?
Building permit.
Building permit. So all these, say for example, up on the north end of Belterre, at the corner of Matanzas and Belterre and Matanzas, right there on that corner, on the west side, there is already an apartment unit that is slated to go in there. They have already been approved. I remember going and seeing a video. They went through the rezoning of that. So that's an apartment unit there. Just south of that, between where the new townhouses are there, there's another one slated to go in there. Another townhouse unit, another apartment unit. We just had this one over on Old Kings. My point is, we can't live local. And I asked the legal counsel, if we put in a moratorium, does that negate or stop any live local? Did you get an answer to that question?
Well, you would have to apply it across the board. You can't apply it to live local only, obviously. But
Well, no, I'm saying as housing, multifamily, single-family housing, any housing. If we say no more family housing in the interim, would that apply to live local? Or can they say, no, we're still going to build because we're following live local?
I think your moratorium is applied to housing in general. It would apply to live local.
Okay.
We'd have to, consider a lot more of the implications of what you're proposing, and
That,
not necessarily that simple. We just say no more.
I think that's my question is there's a lot of different flavors of a moratorium, so to speak, right? Is it all? Is it current applications? Is it only certain types? Is it infill lots versus,
I have no problem with people that own infill lots being able to build on their property. That's excluded. Anything that's in the queue that has been approved, I have no problem with that. But anything going forward, I would say stop it until even if it's until our water is brought up to where it needs to be, because we're in a pinch. So say we spend these millions, hundreds of millions of dollars to fix our water treatment facility. It's not going to stop there. Once all those houses, once those 19,000 units come online, or whatever the number, depending on rezoning and stuff like that, we are still going to be in the negative. We are not going to, it's not sustainable.
So, Mr. Mayor, I'm trying to understand, just kind of with Councilman Miller, so what you proposing is like to date to be determined, we not move forward on westward expansion? Is that what you're proposing?
Pretty much, yes.
that,
We're not going to be permitting new developments out west, because even out there, we can't sustain what we have in the queue now, much less more out there. That doesn't stop us from doing industrial growth, commercial growth. I'm talking about family dwelling units. And right now, they're flooding the zone. I don't know if you guys know it or not, but if you ride up US 1 on the north end, where I live, the land has been raped. It's ready for housing units to go in there. So why are we going to keep putting more houses in the queue when we can't sustain what we have, nor can we sustain what we have in the queue at the present time?
just to understand too, this comes with a lot of detail that would need to be kind of defined. What is that threshold, right, of when that moratorium stops?
Well, that would be
things
for
like
the
that.
council. That would be for the council. At least two of us are here for 4 years. So, and you and I will be making those decisions in the future. And hopefully.
No, I got that,
My
but-
vice mayor will be here beside me and you, Mr. Gambaro.
But the implication was, next week's vote is dependent upon agreeance of this, so that would have to be defined for me to know if I'm okay with it or not.
That's why we're here now. We got until noon to figure it out.
Okay.
So I'm saying no more approval of any more residential housing to a date uncertain.
I think the problem, Mr. Mayor, is that, and I appreciate you bringing it to council, but trying to define it with no background information, without it defined, makes it hard to have this conversation because I don't know exactly what we're talking about.
And the unintended consequences.
And so I appreciate it. I would say that this should come back before us and we should talk about it, but then with more detail and kind of information to work from.
Well, you got a week or so to marinate on it. Because next week, what do we have on the slate next week, city manager?
Next week is a workshop, is your city manager search and discussion of the wireless master plan.
Okay, when's the next business meeting?
The 18th.
The 18th.
18th, and is that when we will be doing the
second
second read
read.
on the utility?
Yes, that's when it's scheduled.
You have 2 weeks to marinate on it, and for the vice mayor, you were asking about what's the alternatives. That was your no vote, was because what are the alternatives?
No, I didn't say what. I said there are.
Well, let's talk about those alternatives. What are the alternatives to raising the utility rate by 30-something% to try to bring our water capacity and our wastewater capacity up to speed? What's the alternative?
Okay, so I have moved for a moratorium twice in the last, probably less than a year. So I'm not adverse to the concept of it. Here, so factually, Councilman Gambaro, I'm looking at the pie charts from the last agenda on the utility rates. The funding for what was presented to us, 46% will be paid by the fiscal year 26 bond. 28% will be paid by the fiscal year 28 bond. Only 10% is paid by impact fees. That's it. We have been charging way too little for impact fees.
Is that for one project?
This is the whole thing. I'm looking at the whole thing. So,
Jason, can you go into
Can you clarify, because you had a previous slide, and you even referred to it as the money slide after I did, but can you walk us through that?
so I'm looking at the utility 5-year capital improvement plan, fiscal year 25 through 29, and 10% is from impact fees. So here's I think I know what you're looking at, though. When you look at the years, there's a different breakdown for it. And the first year, the amount of impact fees is high, but then as you go on, there's none because they're depleted.
We're using the bond, right?
They're depleted, yeah. So we've been charging way too little for impact fees for way too long. We weren't charging miscellaneous fees and charges, which we could have been and should have been charging. We have been crop dusted, period. The time to take corrective action, unfortunately, leaves us with these very drastic measures. We're not the only ones that are encountering this. The whole state of Florida, I would say, by and large, are having these same conversations, and we've seen moratoriums get instituted, even lately, across the state. Respectfully, Mayor, the ITT lots are what contribute to the issues with wastewater treatment plant 1. So if we excluded those from the moratorium, you're not helping that situation much. So that's something that council needs to consider as we consider this high-level concept. We just raised the impact fees the max we can raise them. So at least we've helped that situation. I firmly believe that if we scale back the CIP and we do not pursue both of these bonds right now, we can still get this done. I think that pressure needs to be put on staff and our state representatives to get us the money, period. And I say that because the westward expansion has incredible implications for the state. Our state reps want to see it happen because there are vital transportation networks that will run through that. It is in their interest. It is in the entire state's interest to help us get there. So, whatever ears this needs to hit on that level, they need to be listening. We need help. And if we do a residential moratorium, which again, I'm not against, I've been in favor of it, it will hurt us from a standpoint of getting industry here and things like that. There is a possibility that it could hurt us. I don't think it's quite as inflammatory as people want to make it seem, particularly when we know there are a lot of cities that have moratoriums currently. But it will have some impact from that perspective. We also lose out on the impact fees that we've just raised. So I see both sides of this, but in my opinion, the better way to go is to not get everything in the shopping cart. Take some things out. Scale back the plan. And then we put pressure on staff, whoever's pursuing our grants, our lobbyists, and our state representatives to get us the funding. Because you're right, we cannot afford to keep building at the clip that we've been building with the water issues that we have. And we're here asking the residents to shoulder that burden unfairly once again. And I went back, again, to other rate studies, and I heard the same line in the last two presentations for the rate hikes. Well, if we do this, we won't have to raise rates the next time around. It was not true then, and I don't believe it's true now. I think that we will have to raise rates past the CIP or the CPI the next time the rate study comes around, because to your point, and to your point, Councilman Miller, impact fees never pay for the growth, and we've been in a perpetual state of water deficit. So we can sit here and no offense to staff, but staff can sit there because none of us want to raise the rates. They can sit there and say, oh, well, if we do this now, we won't have to in the future. I don't buy it. The last council shouldn't have bought it. And I don't think it's last council's fault because they did raise rates. Actually, last council adopted what staff put in front of them. I'll say it again here. To not include the expansion of wastewater treatment plant 1 and the last CIP in 2018 is beyond comprehension for me. I don't know how that was not included. I can't comprehend it. But we're past that. We can't do anything about it. But I won't reward it either. And that was the reason for my no vote. I will not reward a over 300% increase in the ask between 2018 and now, because again, that is not tenable for our organization. If every single fund operated that way, we would be bankrupt. We cannot go on that way. So my position is that we need to press our consultant and our representatives from every which way to help us address this issue. We scale back what we're asking for the second read, and we come back with a more reasonable ask so that we're not laying this entire bomb at the feet of our residents. And if we need to consider a moratorium because that is not an alternative that is presented to us, then that's what we need to consider.
I would agree. You've done more research on it than I, but you went back to the 2013 and the 2018. Mm-hmm. And it's safe for me to say that, and I'll come back to this point again, the developers have been taking advantage of this city for far too long. And I feel that when it comes time for that vote, first I'm going to propose a moratorium. And then once we have that vote, we can move on to the rate. So if we want to scale it back, if staff can come back and scale it back, but I want to have that moratorium in place, and we can just as easily turn around and vote it out. But we have to do something. We can't go on like this. And it's through no fault of ours, not one person sitting on this dais. It's not our fault. And I do not want elderly people hitting me up every day and saying, Mike, I'm not going to be able to live in Florida. I'm going to lose my house because I can't afford it. It may not seem like a lot of people who are getting by or doing very well in our society. But for someone on a fixed income that's living on Social Security, her husband's passed away. I have one friend, dear friend of mine. She's on her own. She has somebody else pay her property tax for her. That's how bad off she is. And I can't see moving on. And I'm going to do what's right for the city. So that's what I'm going to propose when we come down to that vote. That's the way it's going to play out. So
Conceptually, Mayor, may I just share something? We keep having this discussion about affordable housing, and quite frankly, I think that's smoke and mirrors. Because when we talk about let's make living here affordable, we completely forget about things like this. We use the term affordable housing like it's this defined term when it's not. And then we say, well, we need to increase density and bring in a bunch more units because that'll make housing affordable. And then when we bring in all this density, what does that cause? Water shortages. What does that cause? Utility rates to go up. So you're taking away from one pot. You're borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, and you're getting this extra density under the auspice of doing something good, affordable housing. And I don't believe in that. So I think that when we're talking about making Palm Coast an affordable place to live and somewhere where young families, workforce families can thrive, it needs to be thought of at the highest of levels and in a very robust way and not in these silos. How are we actually making it possible for families to live and work and play and thrive in Palm Coast? So, as we move forward, particularly with the comp plan, the LDC, all these things, I encourage council to always go back to that. Take it out of the silo and look at it from a very high level. Because I've been struggling with this, as a lot of things have come across. Stormwater too. The more concrete you add, the more you're gonna hurt the flooding issues. So I would just encourage you all to really think about that, because we say we want to make Palm Coast affordable, and we're talking about the comp plan and affordable housing. But if we're just moving the cost of living from one line item to another, we're not helping anybody. So just really keep that in mind as we move forward, please.
And I do feel that the units that we have in the queue, you can already see it now. Prices are coming down.
They are.
They are coming down because they are flooding the market. Considering my house costs $338,000 in 2021. They're selling stick houses out on the west side for close to the 380. Not nearly the quality, not nearly the quality or the size of property, and that's what we have going in. But right now, they keep flooding the market, and prices are going to come down. And as soon as these apartment units come online, hopefully, God willing, the rental rates will come down as well. So that's just my perspective. I hate to be the one to bring it up, but that's going to be my approach coming these next couple of meetings. I'd also like to clarify something. When I said I contacted the AG at the last meeting, I meant I contacted the Attorney General's office. And I spoke to a gentleman there about, some of the things as far as an audit of the city is concerned. I was contacted yesterday and had a conversation with a representative from Senator Collins' office. I am waiting for a call back from them as far as speaking to Senator Collins. That is the Joint Legislative Audit Committee. So if we can get the ease our residents' minds about corruption and kickbacks and all that stuff, as far as a forensic audit, she knows specifically that I'm asking for that committee to form a task force to come down to forensic audit our city. I have no problem with it. I am wholeheartedly in favor of Doge. You can Doge it at the state level, bring it down here, and look at our systems, our employees, everything. But I can tell you now, if we don't get these bonds and bring our water up, there's going to be some severe cuts. our levels of service are gonna go down. Because what comes next? Where's the money gonna come from? It comes with tightening our belt, cutting staff. When you cut staff, you cut levels of service. So just keep that at the forefront of your minds. Any questions? What you got?
It's a lot to digest right now, so,
Well, this
yeah.
is, this forum, when we do these workshops, this is where we get the hash.
No, I
can't call Teresa anymore. and
I
say,
agree.
"Hey, you
Yeah,
know."
I agree. We need to be, this is the only place we can talk and figure it out. So I fully agree with that because it's frustrating. You'd rather, on a Tuesday, if you have a thought about something, you'd rather be able to call one of you guys and say, hey, what do you guys think about this? Does this make sense for the city? But we can't do that, right? So we have to do it here. In terms of, because now we've kind of tied these two different things together, right? Utilities and a moratorium. I don't know what the appropriate way to continue forward. I know we talked about timelines and we have 2 weeks until the second reading. Whether it makes sense to workshop it next week some more so we can talk about it.
We can. Mr. DeLorenzo, can you get the staff looking at the CIP as far as what is the most strategically, the highest priority as far as water treatment? Can we try to scale it down and see what we can come up with on that?
I guess, and that's the question is, we're proposing an alternative, but the details aren't there. So,
Yeah.
To look at it and be able to try to make a decision and see what the impacts are and how that's going to affect our community, we need to know what we're talking about and then what the impacts would be.
Yeah, and I don't support the two being linked. I think it needs to be an independent decision on the utility rate, because that's a current ops problem, Mr. Mayor, of, our water and wastewater challenges that have to be addressed. I think the moratorium should be a separate decision.
I guess it doesn't go away, whatever you do, right?
Well, we are setting at a 2-2 vote right now. And our residents are mad as hell. They hate us. And I get the brunt of it because I'm sitting in this chair.
We get it as well.
That's why I'm tying them together. I've already said it. I am not going to be in favor of these bonds on this next vote unless we put in a moratorium. I want that safeguard that says, hey, look, you're not building any more houses in our city until we get this right. So,
Well, then it may.
if not, we're going to be sitting on the deck of the Titanic and we're going to be raising property taxes or ad valorem to try to cover some of these improvements.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think.
You're in a
that-
difficult spot there, General.
I got it. But I don't think they need to be linked. I think they need to be two distinct decisions.
On top of that, I think there's questions to be had about legality and risk. I know some other cities have this, so I don't know what their specific situations are that define how that.
So we can talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are important pieces of information. There's a lot of aspects. You talk about employment, you talk about, the type of development that we want, industrial, commercial, does that affect that as well? There's a myriad of aspects that are kind of fallout from this, that I think are worth having that discussion about so that we all understand, if we're tossing the grenade, what's going to be hit by that frag, right? So, in theory, I completely understand, I just want to make sure that we're not causing more damage by doing something quick, with little discussion, without understanding the full ramifications of it. And, and I appreciate you bringing it, during this time, because that's the only time we can talk about it. But I think we need to have some scheduled time to talk about it with some more information and facts and try to understand what that whole picture looks like.
Yeah, and I'm going to go ahead and be even more candid than I usually am. I asked for an alternative other than going all in on everything, on all the projects that were proposed. And I pointed out at the last meeting that nothing was proposed. It was still the all or nothing. And to be quite frank, I think it's because it was known that my vote wasn't needed. They had 3. So maybe now my vote is needed a little bit more. Come up with an alternative, figure it out. Because I don't want to be in a perpetual state of being behind, but there are plenty of ears and hands, and again, plenty of interest by the state to keep our community thriving. So maybe now an alternative is a little more pressing.
That's great. I appreciate it. As far as the employment is concerned, Councilman Miller, we are a net exporter of working-class citizens every day.
I understand that, but there is a portion of our population
Yes.
that is adjacent to building, right? All your tradesmen, every street in Palm Coast has somebody on that street that does that for a living and supports their family like that. So, my concern is when we talk about making it unaffordable to live here, you're taking away someone's ability to feed their family in Palm Coast, right? Not somebody else outside, but in Palm Coast. So it's important. And I'm not saying, hey, that's going to destroy the economy, but I think it's something we should consider and talk about and, have the facts on that. How many people are employed by that industry? What are the possible ramifications of it? I don't have those numbers in front of me, so I think those are important to have.
Mr. De Lorenzo, do you have it off the top of your head? How many housing units come online every year?
Depends year to year.
This
If I get my
past year.
computer, I can tell you exactly. But last year was roughly between 2,000 and 2,500, I'm not sure.
So, yeah, so think about that. How many are coming?
But it's economic based, okay? So, in 2011, it was like 100, right? And
Somebody call Toby Tobin, ask him.
These are COs or these are permits or?
we track them both ways.
So how
I
many?
think COs are probably more.
I can give you an exact number for the last
Been
20
coming
years. It's not consistent. It depends on the economy.
Okay, well, let's look at those, numbers and get them for us, and we can workshop this some more next week. We have another workshop.
So would you like for me to amend the agenda? I mean, these things typically need to be publicly noticed that you're going to be discussing about them.
Friday.
I think maybe, no, because we have,
Then we'd be pushing the utilities, right?
why don't you just bring it up again during council discussion? We all know it's a heads up. This will be in the papers. And I will do some diligence on my end as far as looking at the other cities that have had the moratoriums. And I'll even go as far as calling the cities and say, hey, what impact did it have? So we have all that information, and we'll make it a part of the record for that day. I don't know what would go into an actual packet from that
Well,
perspective, but nothing is stopping us from discussing it again.
No, that's why I love these workshops.
Okay, so there's no task to me and no task to your attorney of looking into a moratorium or any of that, because those are ordinance that require readings.
So,
They're not, you,
so
Kind of
what
restricted by time here.
specifically is on
the two things
the
that were
agenda for next?
mentioned before, the city manager search and the wireless master plan.
Okay, yeah, we'll have plenty of time, I'm assuming. Open forum. So, anything else?
So
It's a
just,
wild assumption that we'll have permit.
just so you guys know, so I'm
always
looking at the utility, I know we do. I'm looking at the utility presentation from February 11th, and the issued residential COs, Councilman, you'll see, well, first, this goes to my point that I said earlier, 2023, we had a huge jump, specifically in the new platted lots. You see that difference? Way big difference. But that's, yeah, so if we're looking at 2024, we had 2,000 COs. 2023 was a lot. There were about 2,700 COs. And then the years prior to that, you're looking around 1,700
Kind of flat.
COs, yeah.
Well, no one's denying that we have been hit with a fire hose since COVID. There's no denying that. But it hasn't helped with the city being very friendly with developers and allowing them to rezone lands that were initially designated as industrial lands to commercial, residential, primarily residential. like out on the west side.
I agree.
And I think those were some horrible decisions. And, you know, when I moved here, you know, we moved here, we thought this is an up and coming city. Now, we really moved here because of the schools, but, you know, you would eventually hope that there'd be industry and jobs coming in that can help you support your family. Rather than that, I had to travel for another 5-6 years to sustain my family. So there's been some bad decisions and bad leadership, but we are the ones that have to right the ship, plain and simple. So, good? All right. Any more discussion? Is that Jeannie back there? Jeannie, you got anything to say? Come on up real quick so we can get out of here. We got to go.
I feel like
we got to go open a baby box.
the mayor's trying to burn time until 12, I think.
Oh, I know.
Hi, I'm Jeannie Duarte, C-section, and it's really refreshing to see some common sense up there. I do support the residential moratorium and industrial building. I have a 27-year-old son that lives with me. I live on a cul-de-sac where half of the residents on that cul-de-sac have their adult children living with them because they cannot afford the rent out there. And these stick houses that you guys are building that haven't had people buying them yet, they can't afford the costs of these stick houses. And we need the industrial, we need better jobs. My son works full-time and he cannot afford a rental. He cannot afford to buy his own place. So these industrial jobs out there hopefully can provide employment with better income. 'Cause
Upward mobility is the term.
there you go, yes. We can't support the growth with the type of jobs we have. Working at Walmart, working at McDonald's, people cannot afford. We need other options for better jobs for better pay. I agree. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeannie. Seeing no one else come forward, we'll close public comment. City attorney? Anything? Okay. City manager? Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.